Hey there, my lovely calamities. It's great to have you back on the channel where we delve into the captivating world of beautiful disasters. Today, we're diving deep into Season 1, Episode 3 of The Gilded Age, titled Face the Music. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and smash that notification bell so you never miss out on any of the exciting new content I bring to you. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of this thrilling episode. In this episode of The Gilded Age, the aftermath of Episode 2, Money Isn't Everything, continues to reverberate through high society. The humiliation suffered by Mrs. Fane and Mrs. Morris, the organizers of the charity bazaar, is still fresh in their minds. George Russell, determined to sabotage the event after the women rejected his wife's offer to host it in their ballroom, swooped in and bought up everything in sight. This audacious move solidified George's presence in society, even if it didn't win him any friends. He certainly made a name for himself, and it's clear that crossing paths with George Russell is not a wise move. However, George plans to secure a vote in favor of building a new train station or hitting a roadblock despite having the support of the city's aldermen who secretly invested in his railway. It appears that their votes have been withdrawn. George confronts Mr. Morris, one of the aldermen and the husband of the woman he humiliated at the charity event. Mr. Morris politely explains that the public sentiment has shifted and they no longer support the construction of a new train station. George, however, accuses him and the other aldermen of selling their shares for personal gain, leaving him without the station he desperately needs. George predicts that once the aldermen sell their shares, they will wait for the stock price to plummet before buying them back at a fraction of the cost. This scheme would spell disaster for George and his company. But never underestimate George Russell. He always has a plan up his sleeve. At this stage of the series, every time someone does something to one of the Russells, I can't help but picture them uttering those infamous words spoken by Frances Buxton, the archenemy of George Morris, the ultimate grudge holder. Ada, Marion, and a few other ladies from their circle attend a talk by Clara Barton in hopes of gaining their support for the newly established American Red Cross. During the talk, Ada is approached by Cornelius Eckhard, 38, an old acquaintance who wishes to rekindle their friendship. When Mary shares this encounter with Aunt Agnes, Agnes responds with a scathing remark asking, so all this time he's been yearning to see Ada again. To which Ada responds with a meek, there's no need to be cruel. In that very moment, Agnes' son Oscar enters the scene, informing his mother that he intends to have dinner with the Russells that evening. Agnes retorts, when you say those words, it feels like a stab in the side. And I must admit, I burst out laughing at her delivery. However, Oscar, armed with a repertoire of diss track lyrics aimed at Agnes, coolly responds, well, luckily you have the skin of a rhinoceros. During Oscar's dinner with the Russells, it becomes evident that Gladys Russell, a young woman who has yet to make her official debut in society, is desperately seeking attention from men. As they engage in conversation, Mrs. Russell keeps a close eye on them, clearly having her own intentions for her daughter. After dinner, Mr. and Mrs. Russell retire to bed and discuss Mr. Russell's plan to take down the aldermen who have crossed him. Mrs. Russell emphasizes the importance of sparing no expense in destroying their enemies, as she believes her husband can amass another fortune. Mr. Russell is aroused by his wife's unwavering loyalty to seek revenge, and the two passionately make love in their bedroom. Did anyone else think that the camera might reveal Miss Turner, the maid's gown behind a floor-to-ceiling curtain? Watching them, Oscar proves himself to be just as skilled in his long-term strategy as he is with his quick wit. As we've seen in the pilot episode, he, the sole heir of the Van Ryan family, is a closeted gay man involved in a relationship with John Adams, the heir to former presidents. However, societal expectations dictate that he must marry, so he reveals to his boyfriend that he has found the perfect bride in Gladys. She is incredibly wealthy and naive enough to never suspect his true nature, allowing him to continue his relationship with John discreetly. John takes a long, hesitant drag from his cigarette, clearly expressing his disapproval of this plan. Peggy's heart races with excitement as she receives the thrilling news that the Christian Advocate wants to publish her captivating short stories. Filled with hope, she eagerly heads to their offices to meet the editor. However, Her enthusiasm amplified when she is forced to wait for hours, a stark reminder that racism still thrives in the year 1882 in bustling New York City. Finally, when she is granted an audience with the editor, her spirits plummet further as he insists that she hide her race and the fact that she authored the stories. The editor fears a backlash from their Southern readers if they discover that a talented Black woman contributed to the paper. So torn, Peggy ultimately decides to decline the offer, grappling with conflicting emotions about her choice. Marion finds herself torn between her own desires and the disapproval of her Aunt Agnes when she receives a marriage proposal from Mr. Rakes. Despite knowing that both her aunt and Mr. Rakes disapprove of their union, Marion can't help but develop a soft spot for him after his heartfelt proposal. With her strong will, Marion contemplates defying her aunt's wishes, but unfortunately, her poor Aunt Ada will never have the same opportunity. Meanwhile, when Ada's new crush, Mr. Eckhard, joins Agnes and Ada for tea, Agnes confronts him about his intentions towards Ada. Agnes, who has always claimed to be infallible, suspects that Eckhard sees Ada as a means to financial gain. She reminds him of a past incident when he referred to Ada as a meal ticket during their courtship years ago. Armed with this knowledge, Agnes boldly informs him that she's onto his game, and he promptly excuses himself. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Mr. Morris approaches Mr. Russell, realizing the destructive nature of the greed and status-driven game everyone has been playing. Stripped of his dignity, Mr. Morris pleads with Mr. Russell on his knees, begging him to show mercy. Alongside the other aldermen, they gather in Mr. Russell's office to apologize for their attempts to ruin him financially. However, Mr. Russell, though offering them his pity, refuses to grant them mercy. He explains that while they may have tried to destroy his business, he will not tolerate their wives' attempts to humiliate Mrs. Russell. It's time for them to face the consequences, he declares, dismissing them as ruined men. As the harsh reality of his family's fate sinks in, Mr. Morris returns home and shares his love for his wife before retreating upstairs with a heavy heart, contemplating taking his own life. I'm absolutely blown away by this episode. Can you believe when Mrs. Morris dropped the line, "Money isn't everything," and Marion fired back with, "It does if you haven't got it." It's such a powerful moment. It's like karma is about to hit Mrs. Morris with full force. She always acts so high and mighty, but now she's left with no money because of her husband's carelessness. I can't wait to see how she survives this ordeal. Share your thoughts on this episode in the comments below. Take care of yourself until next time.